Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we commit to giving you the essential knowledge distilled from some of the most complex and often challenging sources out there.
And today, we are absolutely taking on a monumental one.
Yeah.
We're going to be decoding what the author A. Ralph Epperson calls the secret destiny of the New World Order.
Yeah, this is a huge undertaking. The book is based on 27 years of research by Epperson, and his central claim is that he uncovered a truth so profound, and in his words, so unpleasant, that the architects of this future global structure, they decided to hide their entire multi-generational plan right out in the open.
In plain sight, but coded within symbols, rituals, historical documents, all sorts of things.
That's right. So we have just a mountain of material here. It ranges from, the esoteric teachings of the New Age movement all the way to the explicit goals of the Illuminati.
And it all seems to center around this one shared ultimate ambition.
Yeah.
The complete overthrow of the existing world order.
So our mission today is to become the initiated, so to speak, to follow the symbolic trail that Epperson laid out and really try to understand what this alleged secret destiny truly means for the world.
And we're starting with the absolute foundation of this entire premise. I mean, forget ancient scrolls or secret texts for a moment.
Yeah, for now.
We're starting with probably the most common artifact in American life, the U.S. dollar bill.
Exactly. If you have one, pull it out. Flip that dollar over and look at the reverse side of the Great Seal. You see that familiar pyramid, the one topped by the all-seeing eye.
And right beneath it, there's a Latin phrase that Epperson claims is the explicit smoking gun.
The phrase is Novios Ordo Seclorum,
which, translated directly from the Latin, means the New World Order.
Now, a skeptic, they might just dismiss this, say it's a historical motto, a statement about founding a new age for America.
Sure, a new order for the ages.
But Epperson asserts that the individuals who designed and adopted that Great Seal back in 1782, these were men, he argues, who were steeped in ancient philosophies and secret societies.
Right. They weren't just designing a cool motto.
No. He claims they were consciously committing the United States to this secret destiny.
And the implication of that is it's profound. It means that America, from its official inception, was intended to be the mechanism, the vessel maybe, for bringing about a global order that runs completely counter to the ideals of freedom and liberty the nation supposedly stands for.
And the author argues this future destiny is so unpalatable. It involves such drastic, fundamental changes to law, to property, to religion,
that the truth had to be hidden, had to be concealed in nonverbal language, in symbols that only the initiated would ever understand.
And you can see that in the author's methodology. Epperson claimed he spent decades on this research for a reason. He knew how incredible, how controversial these conclusions would sound.
He had to be thorough.
Exactly. He made it his objective to be thorough and believable, and he refused to rely on just single sources for his most critical claims.
That's a really key point in the book. You'll see he frequently quotes multiple recognized authorities on a topic. Often it's 3 or 4 Masons or humanists or communists.
All making the exact same point.
Right. To convince what he calls the most ardent skeptic. He tries to keep his own opinions to a minimum and just let the documented evidence from experts in their own fields speak for itself.
It's a strategy. It's designed to overcome that what he calls the incredibility factor that a claim this big naturally produces.
So before even getting into the details of the future plan, Epperson argues we don't need to wait for proof. He says the symptoms of this change, this systematic erosion of the old order, are already visible. They're measurable in society right now.
Yeah, the source highlights a whole list of what he calls social decay. We're talking about the rampant rise in divorce rates, a dramatic spike in child abuse, pornography consumption.
Overall increase in crime rates.
And these social issues, as they're detailed in the source, they aren't viewed as just random societal evolution.
No, not at all. They're presented as the first successful phase of dismantling the traditional, divinely ordained social order. The very structure that Christianity established, the one that defined basic rights, the family unit, moral absolutes.
And then there's the political front, which is maybe the most crucial part. The author points to the rising, insistent demands for a unified world government.
And the dissolution of national borders.
Exactly. This movement for globalism, which seeks to undermine the sovereignty of nations, is presented as the clear political mechanism for making the NWO a reality. The commitment laid out right there on the Great Seal.
So if the symbols point to the New World Order, what exactly is the agenda? What does it look like?
Well, the source material distills a very clear, multifaceted plan. and it extends far beyond just, political
The
borders.
central philosophical idea is simply that the old world is ending, a new way of doing things is emerging, and the shift is meant to be comprehensive.
Let's start with economics. One of the most immediate and foundational changes cited is the redistribution of property.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It involves a massive global transfer of wealth from what the source calls the have nations, so the developed, wealthy countries.
So they have not nations.
Right. And this isn't just described as foreign aid. It's defined as a foundational global economic restructuring where private wealth is systematically liquidated and reallocated on a planetary scale.
So it's often framed in humanitarian terms, I imagine.
Of course. But the author implies the real goal is just control. Because beyond the economics, the changes are sociological and maybe most disturbingly psychological.
This is where the source quotes the futurist Alvin Toffler.
Yes. Toffler stated that this new civilization brings with it new family styles, completely altered ways of working, loving, and living.
New political conflicts, a new economy, and then he says, most explosively, an altered consciousness.
An altered consciousness. I mean, that suggests the planners understand that you can't get total control just by changing laws.
Right, you have to fundamentally transform the human mind.
Yeah.
Change how people perceive reality, their purpose, their sense of morality.
It's an internal renovation, one that prepares the population to accept all these coming changes as, inevitable or maybe even desirable.
So who's pushing for this? Who provides the political momentum for this systemic overhaul?
The source highlights groups who openly champion the dismantling of the existing structure. Specifically, the Communist Party is cited as actively supporting these changes to the New World Order.
And the author brings in specific figures, right?
He does. He points to people like Angela Davis, a known leader in the U.S. Communist Party. She's quoted in the People's Daily World as endorsing these changes.
And for Epperson's argument, that connection is vital. It links the global ideological revolutionary movement, communism, which is focused on abolishing property, and the state directly to the symbolic goal of the NWO.
This link gets even stronger when you look at the stated strategy for achieving globalism. Richard N. Gardner, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, outlined the approach.
And he said that trying to do it all at once through some big, overt constitutional shift
would fail. It would be too obvious, too alarming.
So instead, Gardner advocated for building the House of World Order from the bottom up. He used this phrase, an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece.
And that is the deliberate, methodical plan for globalism that the source describes. It's not a sudden declaration of world government.
No, it's the slow, incremental sacrifice of national control over things like economics, environmental policy, security.
Until the whole concept of national sovereignty is functionally meaningless.
That strategic erosion, it certainly sounds less like a peaceful democratic evolution and more like a hostile, patient takeover.
Which brings us directly to the prediction that this change involves force and, critically, the abolition of liberty.
The need for control is laid out so starkly in the source material. B.F. Skinner, who is the very influential former chairman of the psychology department at Harvard.
An enormous figure in his field.
Huge. And he stated, just boldly, that we can no longer afford freedom, and so it must be replaced with control over man, his conduct, and his culture.
That is a chilling quote.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Freedom isn't just a secondary ideal to be negotiated.
No. In this view, it's an unaffordable luxury. It actively gets in the way of the new social mechanics that the NWO needs to function.
And if you accept that premise, then abolishing liberty, it doesn't become an act of tyranny.
It becomes a necessary public service.
And the prediction is that this control will eventually be welcomed. The source recalls the prophecy of the Grand Inquisitor as channeled by Aldous Huxley.
Right, who foresaw a future where people, broken by instability and just desperate for certainty, will lay their freedom at our feet, our being the controller's feet, and say to us, make us your slaves, but feed us.
Just give us safety, give us bread.
Huxley wrote that back in 1958, and he gave a specific timeline for this shift. He predicted that the 21st century will be the era of world controllers.
And the reason for their success, he explained, is that unlike the older brute force dictatorships, these new controllers would provide bread, circuses, miracles, and mysteries.
That part needs emphasis. The miracles and mysteries are the key to the modern control system.
Why is that?
Because they ensure that most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution.
So the masses are sedated. They're convinced, maybe even psychologically or chemically managed, to adore their own chains because the system gives them material comfort and lots of engaging distractions.
The source material even provides a shockingly specific near-future timeline for the final implementation of all this.
It does. The changes were predicted to gain irreversible momentum after 1989, with the goal of having the entire global structure substantially in place by the year 1999.
And the final piece of that puzzle is the catalyst. This transition wouldn't just happen because of new laws being passed.
No, it would require a global crisis. Something severe enough to make the masses desperate for the controllers to step in and take over.
The source material suggests the catalyst will be a planned famine or some other serious occurrence, such as a depression or war.
So, a deliberate orchestration of chaos.
Exactly. To mandate the New World Order as the only solution, making the abolition of freedom look like salvation.
Okay, so let's pivot now from the political strategy of control to the required spiritual justification for it all. This is where we enter the domain of the New Age movement.
Right, and Epperson dedicates a substantial amount of time to establishing that the NWO is not just a political system, it's a new global religion.
And researchers cited by Epperson, people like Tex Mars and Constance Cumby, they meticulously detail the New Age movement, not as some loose collection of philosophies.
No, it's presented as a definite, established religion. It has its own doctrine, printed scripture, patterns of worship, specific rituals.
It has leaders, gurus, even its own versions of Bibles and rebirthing experiences.
And the core tenets of this new religion are just utterly opposed to the fundamental structure of the old world.
Cumby outlined what New Agers call the plan, and it is terrifyingly specific.
What does it include?
It includes the installation of a new world messiah, who is known as Maitreya. It includes a unified world government and world religion, a universal credit card system, a world food authority.
And this is the critical part, a plan to utterly root out people who believe the Bible and worship God, and to completely stamp out Christianity.
The author argues this ultimate goal reveals the true philosophical foundation of the New Age movement,
Which is?
bringing about a new world order that writes God out of the picture and deifies Lucifer. It's essentially an anti-theistic movement disguised as spiritual enlightenment.
And this philosophical opposition, it isn't arbitrary. The source stresses that traditional Judeo-Christian faith is the target for a very specific reason.
Right, because it established the very cornerstones of the old world order, things like the sanctity of the family unit, the inalienable rights to life and liberty.
And most importantly, the right to private property.
Exactly. These are the foundations that the American founders called self-evident, and they are precisely what the New World Order seeks to eliminate.
And that antagonism has deep historical roots. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, whose ideas heavily influenced so many communist revolutionaries.
He articulated this hatred very succinctly. Epperson quotes him, "I condemn Christianity. I raise against the Christian church the most terrible of all accusations. It is, to me, the highest conceivable corruption."
So Nietzsche believed Christianity was a religion of weakness, a morality imposed by the oppressed to control the strong.
And the New Age movement, according to the source, basically adopts this perspective. It views those who adhere to traditional faith as the unfit.
And this is where the stakes become, quite literally, life and death.
Yeah.
The source quotes Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
The spiritual leader who popularized transcendental meditation.
The very same. He is quoted as stating, "There has not been and there will not be a place for the unfit." And in context, the unfit are identified as Christians.
He goes on, "The fit will lead, and if the unfit are not coming along, if they will not accept the New Age religion, there is no place for them."
The natural implication of labeling a huge segment of the population as unfit is, it's widespread death, necessary to clear the way for the NWO.
And the source material details some chilling estimates provided by New Age channels and leaders about the required population reduction.
For instance, a man named John Randolph Price claimed his spirit guide told him that up to 2.5 billion people,
which at the time of the research was roughly half the world's population.
half the world's population might perish in the coming global chaos.
But the estimate gets even more specific and maybe more influential when we look at the teachings channeled through Alice Bailey.
From the so-called Tibetan master, Yowal Kuhl.
Right. Kuhl is alleged to have stated that 1/3 of humanity, so about 2 billion people, must die by the year 2000 to purify the planet and usher in the New Age.
So if the plan mandates the mass execution of billions of people, how is that justified morally?
The philosophical underpinning provided by these conspiratorial groups is the simple concept that the end justifies the means.
This is the critical loophole.
It is. Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, included this concept in his initiation ceremony. Epperson quotes him explicitly. If, in order to destroy all Christianity, all religion, we have pretended to have the sole true religion, remember that the end justifies the means.
So that foundational concept initiates the moral license to commit any act, lying, cheating, stealing, even mass murder.
As long as it furthers the Illuminati's stated goal against religion and the established state.
And you see this echoed in the political realm by figures like the socialist writer George Bernard Shaw.
Yes, the source notes he discussed the practical necessity of execution under a socialist state. He suggested that if a person were discovered not to be worth all this trouble, they might be executed in a kindly manner.
But whilst you were permitted to live, you would have to live well. It was just a callous, utilitarian calculus applied to human life.
Now, this new global religion, it requires a single unifying leader, and the source identifies him as Lord Maitreya.
Okay, and who is he supposed to be?
New Age sources claim this individual descended from his ancient retreat in the Himalayas and came to live with the Asian community in East London, England, back in July 1977.
So his public emergence is considered imminent, and it's tied directly to this NWO timeline.
Exactly. And they claim the single individual fulfills the expectations of all major world religions at the same time.
All of them.
All of them. He's the returning Christ for Christians, the Jewish Messiah, the fifth Buddha, Krishna for Hindus, and the Imam Mahdi for Muslims.
So he's presented as the final, singular, spiritual/political figure who will unify all of humanity under this new faith.
And this unification won't necessarily be peaceful. The source quotes Maitreya as saying, "My army is ready for battle, my masters of wisdom and myself at the head. That battle will be fought for the continuance of man on this earth. Rest assured that my army shall triumph."
So that sets the stage for a final violent confrontation between the followers of the NWO and the unfit.
Precisely. And finally, the source dives into the controversial prophetic history surrounding this figure, and it references the psychic Jean Dixon.
Okay.
Dixon claims she had a vision on February 5th, 1962, of a child born in the Middle East who would revolutionize the world and unite all mankind in one faith before the century closed.
And what's the significance of that date?
Well, what's fascinating, and what the source highlights through the New York Times coverage at the time, is that this date coincided precisely with an extremely rare astronomical event.
A conjunction of 5 planets, the sun, the moon, and this invisible celestial body called Ketu, all occurring around 7:05 a.m. New York time.
So while mainstream astronomers dismissed the alignment, Hindu astrologers were reportedly alarmed, predicting disaster.
And the source suggests this planetary alignment marks the birth date of this child who was supposedly full of wisdom.
A characteristic that others attribute to Lord Maitreya. So for the author, this is the ultimate synthesis. You have political goals, spiritual justification, and astrological prophecy, all pointing toward a single figure designed to bring about the New World Order.
Wow. Okay, so to understand why a seemingly modern plan is hiding behind ancient phrases and astrological signs, we have to step back in time.
Way back, thousands of years. The source argues that the New World Order is not a modern invention at all, but the combination of principles derived directly from what are called the ancient mysteries.
And the mysteries were, what, essentially a secret form of worship?
Exactly. Of pagan gods, kept alive across various cultures. This is detailed by the renowned Masonic historian Albert Mackey. To be admitted, you had to undergo these rigorous ceremonies known as initiation.
And crucially, the initiates were bound by an inviolable oath of secrecy,
with the historical penalty for betrayal being death, which highlights the immense value they placed on this concealed knowledge.
And Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Mason and a deep scholar of this esoteric history, he confirmed this. He stated that these mysteries were secret societies that conceal a core secret doctrine about the inner mysteries of life.
And this knowledge, Hall claimed, has been preserved in Todoso, entirely intact, among a small band of initiated minds since the beginning of the world.
So these initiated minds are presented in the source as the long-term custodians of this secret destiny.
That's the idea. And Albert Pike, another powerful figure in Masonry, outlined the ultimate goal of the mysteries.
Which was?
The ultimate annihilation of evil and restoration of man to his first estate by a Redeemer, a Messiah, a Christos. This project, he claimed, links directly back to the great speculations of antiquity.
So we have a secret doctrine with a world-changing millennial purpose. The question then is why? Why the concealment? Why hide something this monumental?
Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, gives us the clearest answer, and his philosophy is absolutely crucial to understanding the NWO's whole modus operandi.
What do you say?
He insisted, "The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in its own name, but always covered by another name." He believed the most effectual way to lead men is through a concealed mystery.
And symbols were the perfect vehicle for that strategy.
Perfect. Foster Bailey, who's cited in the research, explained that a symbol veils or hides a secret, and it channels mysterious forces.
And another source, Rex Hutchins, reiterated that the knowledge of the ancient mysteries was never revealed to the layman except through symbols. It fulfilled the need to conceal sacred truths from the uninitiated masses.
And this is where Epperson makes his most controversial leap. He argues that the ultimate truth concealed behind this historical veil of symbols, carried forward by Masons and other secret societies,
is nothing less than a belief in Lucifer, Satan, the devil.
That is the truth, he claims. That is too horrible, too shocking to be shared with the profane, the uninitiated.
Okay, let's unpack that shocking claim. We need to look at how this Luciferian belief system is allegedly coded into the symbols used by these groups, starting with the serpent.
Right. Manly P. Hall wrote extensively about the Serpent Kings who founded the mystery schools. They used the serpent as their primary symbol and were often called the true sons of light.
And the source connects this immediately to the biblical figure, the one identified in Revelation 12.9 as the old serpent called the devil and Satan.
So therefore, the serpent, which is often used as a symbol of wisdom in these esoteric circles, like the brazen serpent, is interpreted by Epperson as being Lucifer himself, the source of occult knowledge.
Okay, next up is the symbolism of light, the falling star.
This is tied directly to the origin story of Lucifer, the light bearer, who fell from heaven as it's referenced in Isaiah 14.12.
So a blazing star, or especially a shooting star, is interpreted as a conceivable, veiled symbol of Lucifer.
And this link is reinforced by Weishaupt himself. He directly equated the flaming star used in his rituals with the torch of reason, the light of human intellect replacing divine law.
That's the symbolic bridge. It connects the esoteric to the philosophical.
But the most profound and pervasive symbolism, the author claims, is reserved for the sun. And this leads us to the concept of Osiris worship, or Sabianism.
And Sabianism is defined as the ancient worship of the sun, moon, and stars, a pagan practice.
Correct. Masonic authors like Mackey and Pike link the blazing star directly to the sun, and Masons, even in modern lodges, participate in something called the rite of circumambulation,
Where they walk around the altar, often eastward.
in imitation of the course of the sun.
The source makes the explicit connection here. The sun god, whether he's called Ra or Osiris or Mithras, is just a veiled representation.
And the conclusion drawn is unambiguous, Epperson says. Simply stated, the sun god that they were praying to is Lucifer.
So the idea is that the average Mason is praying to the sun as a source of physical light, but the adepts, the highest initiated, they know the sun is a symbolic representation of the light bearer himself.
And the ultimate payoff of this worship and this knowledge is the deification of man. This is the central promise of both the NWO and the New Age movement.
The goal is to acquire unlimited knowledge and ultimately to personally become a god.
This ambition perfectly mirrors the biblical account of Lucifer's desire, stated in Isaiah 14.14. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
So the New Agers and Masons are described as believing that man can complete his evolution by becoming a godlike being. They're basically trying to complete the original project that was initiated in the Garden of Eden.
The New Age evangelist Shirley MacLaine famously encapsulated this when she just declared, I am God.
She believed that by stating this out loud, the sound vibrations would literally align the body's energies to a higher attunement.
And the source connects her to the political left, noting her library had works on Marxist theory, and her den displayed pictures of her with Fidel Castro and Nikita Khrushchev.
This whole deification concept, it serves to replace the traditional creator god with man's own faculties.
Exactly. Both Weishaupt and the Humanist Manifesto, which are cited by Epperson, declare reason and intelligence as the most effective instruments humankind possesses. So reason is deified.
Barbara Pike is quoted here as stating, "Reason is the absolute. It is in IT we must believe. Man is elevated to complete control, capable of making up his own moral code without any concern for God's moral absolutes."
Right. Let's unpack this. We've spent the last few deep dives looking really closely at the foundations of all the source material.
Right. The Great Seal, the symbols.
The sun, the serpent, and that whole history of Luciferian worship that's allegedly hidden inside secret societies, the Masons, the Illuminati. And we've kind of established, according to this research, the who and the why, the ideological engine behind it all.
And that context is so essential because up to now, we've mostly been dealing with the esoteric side of things, the symbols, the history.
The veil.
Exactly, the veil. Now we're pivoting. We're getting to the action plan. And for you, the learner, this deep dive is going to shift focus pretty intensely. We're going right into chapters 21 through 39.
And this is where they confront the core mission.
The core mission.
Yeah.
The actual blueprint for the destruction of the old world order.
And the founding of the Novius Ordo Seclorum.
That's it.
Yeah, this is where the research, I think, stops being so theoretical and starts giving us a specific strategy. And honestly, it gets pretty intense.
It does.
We're moving past just, seeing a pyramid on a dollar bill and into understanding the alleged documented ways that these planners,
The Masons, the humanists, the communists, as the source groups them all together.
how they intend to just dismantle society as we know it.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to really lay out the exhaustive, detailed claims, specifically about the 4 big institutions they targeted for abolition:
Okay, what are they?
religion, the family, private property, and national sovereignty.
The 4 pillars of the old world.
Right. And we're going to look at the ideological framework they supposedly use to justify getting rid of them all.
This material is definitely demanding, but it's absolutely essential for you to grasp the alleged scope here, the sheer detail of these centuries-long plans.
We're moving from symbols to strategy.
And we have to start right at the top with the supposed chain of command.
Okay, so let's start with chapter 21. It lays out this really shocking chain of command within the Masonic hierarchy.
And this is specifically focused on the relationship between Albert Pike.
Yes. Albert Pike, the sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite, and some very high-level U.S. government officials.
Pike was active for a long time, from like 1850 to 1891, and these sources really paint him as this spiritual and intellectual giant of the Scottish Rite.
Oh, absolutely. Almost like a religious figure to his peers.
So the source brings up testimony about a General A.G. Brown and President Andrew Johnson. What's the implication there? Because it's pretty shocking.
It's astounding. The source material presents testimony, allegedly from General Brown, that suggests President Andrew Johnson, while he was the sitting head of state,
The President of the United States.
was subordinate to Albert Pike within the Masonic structure.
How is that even possible?
Well, Johnson received the 4th through the 32nd degrees of the Scottish Rite on June 20th, 1867. So he was a very advanced member.
Okay.
And the testimony implies that his duties as a Mason were, in some cases, actually superseding his duties under the Constitution.
But how could that work in practice? I mean, everything in the White House is so visible. The source must suggest some kind of mechanism.
It does, and it all hinges on the oath, the obedience oath that all Master Masons take in the 3rd degree.
What does this say?
The oath has this very explicit, very binding phrase. It says, "I do promise and swear that I will obey all regular signs, summonses, or tokens given from the hand of a brother Master Mason."
Wow. The key word there has to be obey.
It's everything. If these claims are true, and a high-level Mason like Pike could issue a summons or a token,
Then a sitting president who is oath-bound would be required to follow that instruction.
exactly. It establishes this parallel hierarchy, one that completely bypasses the visible constitutional government.
A shadow government.
In effect, yes. And this isn't just about one man's personal obedience. This really sets the stage for the entire strategic blueprint we're about to unpack.
Because it implies that the real goals of Masonry, the destruction of the old world, can be pushed forward through people who are placed in the highest positions of civil power.
It can be enforced, or at the very least facilitated by them.
Okay, so that leads us to chapter 22, which is fascinating because it forces you to look way beyond the surface of a Masonic ritual. The source dissects the foundational legend of Masonry.
The symbolic assassination of Hiram Abiff.
Right.
Yeah, so the standard story is that Hiram, who was the master architect of Solomon's temple, he refuses to share the secrets of a master mason, and he gets killed by 3 ruffians.
And Masons themselves will say this is just a purely symbolic event.
They do. But the source insists that the official interpretation of what those ruffians symbolize is the absolute key to understanding the entire NWO blueprint.
And the source material doesn't just guess at this. It relies on a pretty shocking interpretation from a guy named Rex Hutchins.
A prominent 32nd degree Mason, yeah. In his approved text, A Bridge to Light.
So who or what do the three ruffians, Jubela, Jubilo, and Jubilum, actually represent, according to Hutchins?
Well, Hutchins explains that they aren't actually people. They're concealed symbols for forces that are afraid of man's reason and intellectual freedom.
Okay.
To understand it, you have to look at the weapons they used and where on the body the fatal blows landed.
Let's get into the most significant ones.
The first really significant blow is delivered at the South Gate. And the instrument used is called the rule, or in Greek, the canon.
The canon.
Like canon law.
Precisely. This blow represents the bureaucracy of the early church establishing canon law, this rigid body of religious rules, specifically to suppress intellectual freedom.
Freedom of speech, freedom of thought.
Exactly. So the first symbolic enemy, the first ruffian, is organized religious authority that limits human thinking.
And the final blow.
The final fatal blow is delivered at the East Gate. It's a blow right to the head, the seat of the intellect.
Oh.
And this represents the cumulative power of all those forces that fear and try to suppress the potential of man's reason.
So the source argues this whole ritual establishes the core Masonic worldview.
Yes, that traditional organized religion is the primary enemy of human reason. The assassination is symbolic revenge. This philosophical foundation, this anti-clericalism and championing of human reason, it leads us right into chapter 24.
Right, how this worldview gets translated into moral subversion and absolute obedience inside the organization itself.
And it comes back to the oaths again. The secrecy oath is much broader than just keeping ritual knowledge secret.
Way broader.
Yeah.
The oath requires a master mason to keep a worthy brother's secrets inviolable, with only two very specific exceptions allowed.
And they are?
Murder and treason excepted.
Okay, let's just pause on that for a second. The implication of what's omitted there is huge.
It's massive.
If a fellow Mason commits, I don't know, blackmail, serious fraud, kidnapping, any crime short of murder or treason against someone who is not a Mason.
The oath binds the other master mason to absolute silence. He is oath-bound not to report that crime to any civil authority.
This is critical. The source is basically saying this creates a literal state within a state.
A secret government with its own system of law, its own system of loyalty. And to really drive this home, the source discusses a Masonic handbook that gives some stunning advice to members who might be on a jury.
This part is unbelievable.
It really is. The advice states that if a defendant, during a trial, gives the grand hailing sign of distress,
the secret Masonic sign for help,
the juror must acquit him, regardless of the evidence presented in court.
And how do they justify that? I mean, that's perjury.
They have an ethical loophole for it, according to the source. The handbook says, and this is almost a direct quote, "It may be perjury, to be sure, to do this, but then you're fulfilling your obligation, and you know if you live up to your obligations, you'll be free from sin."
That is a profound twisting of philosophy.
It is.
It's saying that your loyalty to the organization, even if it means breaking the law, lying under oath, destroying the whole public justice system,
not only frees you from punishment, but actually purifies you. It removes sin. The loyalty to the group completely supersedes civil law, constitutional oaths, everything.
And this redefinition of morality doesn't just stop at the courtroom door, does it?
Not at all. The source shows how it extends into personal conduct, specifically adultery.
Right. The oath promises not to violate the chastity of a fellow Master Mason's female relatives.
His wife, mother, sister, or daughter. A very specific list.
And the interpretation the source offers is that this very specific restriction, by what it leaves out, implicitly grants permission.
Or at least it removes the oath-bound restriction.
You engage in adultery with the family of anyone who is not a Master Mason.
That is the claim being made, yes. It frames morality as entirely transactional. It's not based on universal principles. It's based purely on your membership status.
So if the act doesn't hurt another Master Mason, it's fair game within their moral framework.
It ties right back to the philosophy that acts are not right or wrong intrinsically, but according as their effects are hurtful or helpful to the brotherhood.
So all of this, the hierarchy, the moral revisions, it all leads to the ultimate goal. And that's revealed in chapter 25, the 33rd degree.
The innermost sanctuary of Masonic mysticism.
With the motto, Ordo AB Chao.
Order out of chaos. And this is the moment. This is where the full blueprint is finally unveiled. The source material citing the 33rd degree initiation ritual, says the candidate finally learns the true identity of the three infamous assassins of Hiram Abif.
And these three assassins are not people. They're the three pillars of the old world that are targeted for destruction.
That's it. They are. Number one, law. And that's defined not as justice, but as any government that isn't in harmony with their definition of individual rights.
Okay.
Number two is property, based on the idea that the earth belongs to nobody and its fruits belong to all, a clear rejection of private ownership.
Number three.
Religion, defined as the philosophies that people adopt. Religion, they say, annihilates man by depriving him of his precious rights.
Which echoes that whole anti-reason theme from the Hiram Abif ritual.
Perfectly.
So the symbolic murder of Hiram Abuf, who represents man, the king of nature, is seen as the murder of man's basic rights by these three institutions.
Yes. And the final great work of the Master Masons is to avenge Hiram by hunting down and destroying the assassins themselves.
Law, property, and religion.
And the blueprint then dictates where they should focus the attack. They have to concentrate the most deadly attacks on religion.
Why religion first?
Because, and I'm quoting the source here, once religion is dead, law and property will fall to our mercy, and we shall be able to regenerate society by founding on the corpses the assassins of man, Masonic religion, Masonic law, and Masonic property.
That is the New World Order blueprint in absolute chilling clarity.
Total annihilation of traditional faith, private ownership, and constitutional government.
All to be replaced by a Masonic, centralized, and controlled version of all three. And if that's the philosophical engine, the source material then shows us the specific fuel that makes it run.
Humanism and situation ethics.
Okay, so chapter 26 gets into the humanist religion, which the sources claim provides the modern philosophical ammunition for attacking those three assassins.
Right. The sources define humanism as a modern, non-theistic, rationalist movement.
Basically, the idea that man is capable of self-fulfillment and ethical behavior all on his own, without recourse to supernaturalism.
It's the elevation of man's reason to the level of a deity. It perfectly fulfills that Masonic ideal we were just talking about.
And they're not subtle about it. They put this right in their founding documents.
Not at all. The Humanist Manifestos explicitly state they find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of a supernatural. They reject the prayer-hearing God.
And the core conclusion is the ultimate declaration of self-sufficiency.
No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. It aligns perfectly with the goal of crushing traditional religion.
So the source then structures this humanist belief system on something it calls the humanist stool.
Yes, saying that its stability rests on three major legs.
Which are?
Evolution, atheism, and communism.
And that's how the philosophical attack on God connects directly to the economic and social structures they want to build.
Exactly. Let's just look at the economic leg for a second. The socialist economic mandate is right there in the 14th principle of Humanist Manifesto Oi.
What does it say?
It says that the existing acquisitive and profit-motivated society has shown itself to be inadequate.
So it advocates for what instead?
A socialized and cooperative economic order.
That's the abolition of property. It's straight out of Marx.
It is. And what's really fascinating and important for you to understand is that the humanist religion isn't just some philosophy debated on college campuses.
No, it achieved significant legal recognition, which is essential for this whole strategy.
It is. The Supreme Court case, Tricasso v. Watkins, back in 1961, actually recognized secular humanism as a religion.
So it gave the same protections and limitations as other religions.
Including, and this is notable, the ability for sincere followers to claim exemption from the military draft.
So this legal status means it can challenge traditional religions on their own turf, inside public institutions.
And that leads directly to the core target. The education system. The source just hammers on the point that humanism is actively embedded in public education.
We saw that strategy from Adam Weishaupt, acquire the direction of education.
And the Alabama legal case, the source cites, where a federal judge ordered 36 textbooks removed from schools, the ruling was that these books furthered a belief in humanism and denied the role of religion.
So the argument is that this philosophical engine is being systematically installed in the minds of the next generation.
That's the claim.
Okay, moving to chapter 27. We get to the moral framework that allows all this destruction to happen, situation ethics.
The moral absolute of no absolutes.
Right. The definition is so simple, but it contains so much destructive potential. The situation determines what's right or wrong, and since situations constantly change, what's right today may be wrong tomorrow.
And the only supposed absolute is to always to act with loving concern.
But how does always to act with loving concern possibly justify the complete annihilation of society, which is what the 33rd degree calls for?
This is the crucial bridge the source material draws. This is the justification for that old end justifies the means philosophy used by the communists and the Illuminati.
How so?
Well, if the ultimate goal liberating humanity from the tyranny of religion, property, and law, and creating this utopian new world order, if that's the highest possible expression of loving concern for the whole of humanity,
then any means you use to achieve that goal become morally permissible.
any means, exactly. The ultimate loving concern is for the New World Order itself, so anything that stands in its way can be justly destroyed.
The source links this logic directly to communist leaders.
It does. Nikolai Lenin declared, "Everything is moral, which is necessary for the annihilation of the old exploiting social order."
Oh, wow.
And communism, in its own foundational text, says it abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and morality. Situation ethics provides the intellectual permission slip for revolution, for violence, for theft, for suppression on a massive scale.
And this moral framework is mirrored directly within Masonry, connecting all the groups together.
Albert Pike himself claimed that all truths are truths of period and not truths for eternity. He explicitly dismissed any idea of eternal moral absolute.
Valid given rates.
Gone. And another Mason, H.L. Haywood, wrote that acts are not right or wrong intrinsically, but according as their effects are hurtful or helpful. That is, situation ethics fully endorsed. It gives them the moral license to carry out the NWO blueprint without any remorse.
The New Age figures cited in the source, like Shirley MacLaine, they reinforce this too.
She claimed, "There is no such thing as evil. Evil is fear and uncertainty." This just removes the concept of sin entirely. All that's left is what's expedient.
So we have the target list, we have the philosophical justification, and now we get into the actual tactics.
Yes, how the destruction of the old world is systematically carried out on multiple fronts. This is section 3, and it details the specific attacks laid out in chapters 28 through 34.
So we start with the primary target, organized religion, and the main method used to destroy it, which is the takeover of education. This is detailed across chapters 28, 31, and 32.
Right. And the source uses the case of a Pastor Everett Sullivan in Nebraska back in 1977 as this concrete, chilling example of the state asserting total control over religious teaching.
What happened to him?
Sullivan was actually jailed for refusing to get his Christian school and its teachers licensed by the state.
And why was that licensing issue so important? For Sullivan, it wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a theological line in the sand.
It absolutely was. The core belief for Pastor Sullivan was that Christ could not be submitted to the authority of the state.
So to get a license, to let the state dictate the curriculum or the textbooks or teacher qualifications,
Meant submitting his religious ministry to secular authority. He saw it as the state trying to put itself above God. And the fact that the state literally jailed him and tried to padlock the church doors shows how serious that assertion of supremacy was.
which lines up perfectly with the historical strategy of the planners.
100%.
Yeah.
Adam Weishaupt, the Illuminati founder, he said it outright. We must acquire the direction of education and of the pulpit, and that's done by means of the schools.
Control the schools, control the future.
And eliminate any competing loyalties. The communists are also explicitly dedicated to this. The source quotes the Communist Party's goal to gain control of the youth for a successful revolution.
And they aim for systematic atheistic propaganda and freedom from religious prejudices.
And it's not passive. The head of the Young Communist League, Viktor Mikronenko, confirmed that atheist education is one of the primary tasks. The goal isn't neutrality, it's replacement. Using public institutions to systematically replace religious belief with secular humanism.
The source even suggests that some seemingly harmless educational research points toward this same goal.
Yeah, the National Training Laboratories, which was an NEA program, published materials that basically foresaw high school education leading toward the elimination of religious superstition. The planners see public education as the most effective weapon for this.
And Chapter 32 really underscores the legal mechanism here by looking at the Russian model.
The Russian Constitution says the church is separated from the state and the school from the church, which sounds familiar.
It sounds like separation of church and state.
Right, but the actual laws are far more restrictive.
Yeah.
Russian law requires religious groups to be registered with the government, and it prohibits them from organizing special prayer meetings or teaching for kids outside of state supervision.
which prevents the church from passing its faith to the next generation.
Without the state looking over its shoulder. And the source argues that this fear of state registration and control is exactly what was at the heart of conflicts like the Sullivan case in America.
So, destroy religion through state oversight and by taking over education.
That's the plan.
Okay, next up is Chapter 29, which details the attack on the family unit, often called the cornerstone of civilization.
And a primary source of competing loyalty to the state.
Marx's goal was explicit.
Abolition of the family. And that's pursued through cultural redefinition and, really crucially, through economic and legal pressures. The source notes the New Age movement's goal to destroy monogamy, arguing that young people are trying to devise and invent a form of marriage appropriate to a new era.
The goal is just fragmentation and instability.
Exactly. And the very definition of family has been systematically changed to strip away the traditional legal and biological ties.
Right. The source brings up the American Home Economics Association.
In 1979, they redefined the family as two or more persons who share resources, share responsibility, regardless of blood, legal ties, adoption, or marriage.
So by reducing the family to just a situational living arrangement based on sharing resources,
it minimizes the importance of the legal, biological, and religious structure. And that makes it much easier for the state to step in and intervene.
the source material gives some pretty sobering examples from communist countries that used much more brutal methods to get this done.
Oh, the examples are stark. In Cuba, the Castro regime used forced child labor and deliberately broke down parental authority with state educational programs designed to alienate kids from their parents' values.
And in China.
In China, early communism involved physically separating husbands and wives, putting children in government nurseries, and then the tragedy of state-mandated infanticide with the one-child policy. That's total state control over reproduction itself.
But the source argues that the attack in America is much more subtle. It uses economic and legal pressure to get the same results.
Yeah, and the subtle pressures are key. First, you have tax laws, the so-called marriage tax, where a married couple might pay higher taxes than two single people with the same income.
It's a financial disincentive to get married.
It is. And second, tax laws are often designed to discriminate against parental choice. They favor institutionalized daycare and government-approved centers over, say, a full-time mother or informal care from a grandparent.
So the economic pressure of inflation, which we'll get to, forces both parents into the workforce. Then the tax code punishes them if they stay married and favors government-approved institutional care for their children.
That is the alleged systematic erosion. And what's more, the research cited in the source supports the negative impact of this. A Dr. Jay Bilski's research suggested that non-maternal care for more than 20 hours a week for infants under 1 is a significant risk factor.
A risk factor for what?
For impeding the parent-child bond, and it often leads to more rebellious or aggressive behavior later on.
So the goal of getting kids into state-controlled education earlier is achieved through economic necessity. And a side effect is the breakdown of stable behavior needed for a free society. And this culminates in some truly frightening proposals.
Total state control. Organizations like Friends of Earth and the World Future Society propose schemes to license or certify parents.
You need a license to have a kid.
And the World Future Society took it even further, suggesting using genetic scanning to find couples who could breed super babies, only to mandate that those children be handed over to others who are licensed to raise them.
Because child rearing is too important to be left to chance.
The state asserting absolute ownership over the next generation.
Okay, Chapter 30. The attack on association and liberty, which it links back to the definition of a free person.
The source defines freedom very simply. Free men discriminate and have the right to choose their associates. Slaves do not.
And the argument is that recent legal rulings are basically redefining freedom by forcing people to associate.
By introducing court-ordered compulsion, yes.
And the big case cited here is the 1987 Supreme Court ruling about the Rotary Clubs.
Right. These were all male, voluntary associations, purely for friendship and charity. And the Supreme Court forced them to admit women.
And the court's reasoning was that this does not violate the right of members to choose their own associates.
Which is a profound contradiction. The court admits there's a fundamental right to associate, but then rules to violate it. It redefines freedom of association to mean you're only free to associate with people the government approves of.
This idea of mandatory service, of compelled action, it even found its way into major political proposals.
Like Senator McCain's proposed National Service Act of 1989. It called for a comprehensive, fair, and mandatory system of community or military service for all young people.
And they called this mandatory service a responsibility of citizenship.
But the source points out this huge constitutional conflict,
The 13th Amendment.
which prohibits involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime. If mandatory service is involuntary servitude, then the only way it's legal is if being a citizen is now considered a crime.
Or if the government just redefines the words.
Which the source argues is exactly what's happening. A deliberate distortion where slavery becomes freedom to soften public perception.
And this compulsion ties directly to the second assassin of Hiram Abiff property. Chapter 33 outlines the subtle attack on private property and wealth.
We have to remember the explicit goal of the planners, Illuminati, communists, humanists, is to abolish private property, to create a socialized and cooperative order.
But the source says in America, this is done not with open revolution, but with two subtle, complex weapons.
Aimed right at the working class. The first, as you said, is taxation.
Right.
Increased taxes continually limit your ability to buy property, to save capital, to pass wealth down to your kids. It's a slow, methodical transfer of wealth from the individual to the state.
And the second weapon is much more complex, inflation. We need to be really clear how the source defines inflation here.
It's critical. The source defines inflation specifically as an increase in the money supply, which in America is controlled by the private Federal Reserve System.
And the fact that it's a private system is the key.
That's the claim, that the Fed isn't a true government entity, but a private corporation owned by its member banks. And by controlling the money supply, the source argues, this system can deliberately create business cycles, booms, and busts, all designed to transfer wealth.
How does that work?
When new money is created, it devalues the existing savings and wages of the working class, the people furthest away from the money printer. It effectively transfers their purchasing power to the entities closest to the money supply.
The banks and connected interests.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated, hidden way to subtly abolish property rights.
So even if you still technically have the deed to your house, if you can't retain your wealth or your purchasing power over time, your property rights are being eroded.
It's control through invisible economic force. It makes the population dependent on the state and the institutions that control the money.
And finally, Chapter 34. The attack on the last cornerstone of the old world, nationalism. The goal is a one-world government.
This goal is presented as being ancient. The source connects the weakening of nations all the way back to Lucifer's fall in the Old Testament. And Karl Marx was totally explicit about it.
He said, the communists are further approached with desiring to abolish countries and nationalities.
And the modern non-communist blueprint for this is right in the Humanist Manifesto too.
What does it say?
It says, we deplore the division of humankind on nationalistic grounds. The best option is to transcend the limits of national sovereignty and to move toward the building of a world community, with world law and a world order based upon transnational federal government.
And the Masonic author Manly P. Hall agreed.
He wrote that patriotism will yet demonstrate itself to be a most pernicious attitude.
So the final vision is a fully centralized, borderless world.
Hall predicted that we are approaching a nobler era when nations shall be no more, when the whole earth shall be under one order, one government, one administrative body. This is the ultimate final form of the New World Order.
Achieved by systematically destroying the family, property, and national sovereignty. It's chilling to see the claimed destruction of law, property, and religion, the three assassins, being carried out on so many fronts. It really is a comprehensive blueprint.
So after reviewing the whole strategy, we turn to Chapter 36. This is where the source material tries to connect high-level political figures directly to this hidden agenda.
Through their use of symbolic language and a specific timeline for getting it all done.
And it focuses on Presidents Reagan and Bush. Let's start with Ronald Reagan's address to the 1988 Republican Convention.
What did he say that was so significant?
Reagan spoke of approaching the new millennium, the uncharted reaches of a new age, and our sunlit new day.
Okay.
The source argues this is deliberate coded language. Millennium refers to the predicted 1,000-year reign of Lord Maitreya, the New Age Messiah.
And sunlit new day.
That uses the sun, which Masons see as a symbol of the sun god Lucifer, the light bearer, as a metaphor for the coming new era.
And then Vice President George Bush is famous phrase, 1,000 points of light, is analyzed in the same way.
Yeah, Bush used it to describe volunteer groups, but the source says the specificity of the number is the key. 1,000 connects to the millennium, the length of Maitreya's reign.
And light connects back to Lucifer, the light bearer.
Or the enlightenment that the planners want to bring in. The claim is that this was intentional, esoteric vocabulary, a signal to those who were in on it.
And this is where the timeline gets really specific and the claims become extraordinary. The source details this article linking Bush to a symbolic event at the end of the century.
It's an astonishing article. It reported that Bush was committed to ushering in the next century at the Great Pyramids of Cheops in Giza in 1999.
And this was an event hosted by the Millennium Society. Why is that so significant?
Because the pyramids, according to all the earlier source material, are alleged sites of ancient Luciferian initiation ceremonies. So for a sitting political leader to commit to such a highly symbolic location for a millennium celebration.
The source claims it connects him directly to the planner's hidden agenda.
That's the argument. And then President Bush allegedly gave a very explicit public countdown.
When was this?
On March 16, 1989, President Bush made a public statement asking, "What are we doing to prepare ourselves for the new world coming just 11 short years from now?"
Okay, so 1989 plus 11 years is the year 2000.
Exactly. The source material uses this as definitive, high-level proof that the New World Order was scheduled to be inaugurated at the start of the 21st century.
It's presented as proof that the planners had a rigid schedule and that the highest levels of government were not only aware of it, but were signaling it.
That's the claim.
So Chapter 38 then provides this really concise summary of the whole NWO idea from an outsider, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon.
The French socialist, yeah.
Yeah.
Decades earlier, he defined it perfectly. It encapsulates the goals of destroying the three assassins.
What was his definition?
Our principle is atheism in religion, anarchy in politics, no property in the economic sphere.
Atheism destroys religion, anarchy destroys law and sovereignty, and no property destroys the economic system. It's all there.
It is. And finally, the source uses that bleak vision from George Orwell's 1984 as the final summary of what this New World Order would actually feel like.
Right, not the utopia that they promise.
Not at all. Orwell's picture, as cited by the source, is this. If you want to picture the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
So it presents the NWO not as that sunlit new day the politicians talked about, but as endless, brutal control.
Under a transnational government over a totally subjugated population.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, after going through this exhaustive documentation of the blueprint? We've seen the shocking clarity of the goals.
The explicit destruction of organized religion, private property, national sovereignty.
All allegedly revealed through symbolic texts, initiation rituals, and these seemingly harmless public statements by world leaders.
And the source material consistently argues that the root cause of all the world's problems, the thing that makes this New World Order possible, is simple but profound.
What is it?
Men have forgotten God. And this knowledge isn't presented as just history or some conspiracy theory. It's presented as a current operational threat. A plan that was allegedly on a rigid, decades-long schedule, all pointing toward the start of the 21st century.
And the author of these sources issues this direct challenge to the person reading it.
To you, stating 1,000 years of this world's future is in the hands of the reader, and choose to inform others.
So, considering that very specific timeline they predicted, the year 2000, what does it mean for you to have this knowledge now, all these years later?
Knowing this plan was allegedly set in motion centuries ago, and that the planners focused on using these subtle forces, like inflation, mandatory service, psychological pressures on child rearing, and taking over education to weaken the core institutions of liberty. What changes have happened since that predicted date that you now have to reevaluate?
Reevaluate through the lens of this alleged strategic blueprint.
That's the ultimate question this deep dive leaves with you. Does history confirm the plan was successful, or did the plan simply fail to meet its deadline?